Liberal TV host fired after insulting Karoline Leavitt live on air. We dream of reaching 1,000 subscribers by the end of February. Subscribe to the channel and be part of this dream too. The newsroom of Prime Perspective hummed with the controlled chaos of a live broadcast in the making. Producers barked last-minute instructions through headsets, interns scurried with stacks of notes, and the director monitored multiple screens, ensuring the show would run seamlessly. In the center of it all, Madison Clark, the station's leading liberal host, adjusted the collar of her tailored suit as a makeup artist dabbed powder on her face. The show was minutes away from going live, and tonight, the stakes were high. Madison had built her reputation on his sharp-tongued interviews, known for dismantling conservative viewpoints with relentless precision. For years, she had prided herself on being the voice of progressive America, a champion of modern ideals. But lately, cracks had begun to show. The ratings weren't what they used to be, and younger voices were emerging, challenging the authority she once wielded. Tonight's guest, Karoline Leavitt, was one of them. The young conservative commentator had been making waves, known for her eloquence and unshakable confidence. To many, she was the new face of right-wing media. To Madison, she was just another opponent to crush. Backstage, Karoline sat in a waiting room, scrolling through her phone with a calm, almost indifferent air. Her team whispered final words of encouragement, but she hardly needed them. She had faced tougher critics before and knew Madison's playbook: interruptions, loaded questions, dismissive tones. None of it intimidated her. She had built her career not by attacking, but by staying composed, letting her words carry more weight than her emotions. The producers finally signaled her to head to the stage, and as she stepped into the bright studio lights, she met Madison's gaze for the first time. Neither woman blinked. The countdown began. 5. The cameras adjusted their angles. 4. The director signaled silence. 3. The crew held their breath. 2. The theme music played. 1. The red on-air light blinked to life, and Madison flashed her signature smile at the millions watching. Good evening, America. Tonight, we have a very special guest. The battle had begun. The stage was set, the cameras rolled, and the tension in the air thickened as Madison Clark's voice filled the studio. Tonight, we're joined by Karoline Leavitt, a rising conservative commentator who has been making waves in political media. Karoline, welcome to Prime Perspective. Karoline sat with perfect poise, her hands neatly folded on her lap. Thank you, Madison. I appreciate the invitation. Madison's smile was polite but tight, barely masking her determination to control the narrative. She leaned slightly forward, signaling her readiness to attack. Let's get straight to it. You've been very vocal about your criticisms of mainstream media, accusing networks like ours of being biased. Given that, I have to ask, why come on this show if you believe we're so dishonest? It was a classic opening move. Put the guest on the defensive. But Karoline was unfazed. She met Madison's gaze and replied with calm confidence. Because conversations like these matter, she said smoothly. I believe that people deserve to hear both sides of the debate, even when we strongly disagree. If we only engage with those who think exactly like us, we're not really learning, are we? A murmur rippled through the studio audience. Madison arched an eyebrow, her expression shifting just slightly. Karoline's answer had landed well, and she knew it. Madison recovered quickly, her voice sharp. That sounds noble, but let's be real. Your platform thrives on criticizing so-called liberal elites while catering to an audience that rejects progress. How do you defend yourself against the claim that your rhetoric fuels division rather than unity? Karoline didn't hesitate. I could ask you the same question, Madison, she said, her tone unwavering. Your show frequently characterizes conservative voices as outdated, uneducated, or even dangerous. Isn't that also fueling division? A tense silence filled the studio. The producers in the control room exchanged nervous glances. Madison wasn't used to being challenged so directly, and it showed. She exhaled, forcing a laugh. Well, I think there's a clear difference between holding people accountable and spreading misinformation. Karoline tilted her head slightly. I completely agree. That's why it's important that journalists focus on facts rather than narratives. It was a subtle jab, but it hit its mark. Madison's expression darkened. The control she so effortlessly maintained in interviews was slipping, and she knew it. She adjusted her posture, gripping the armrest of her chair just a little tighter. The audience could sense it, the shift in power, the battle of ideologies unfolding in real time. Madison had expected to dictate the flow of the conversation, but Karoline was proving to be more formidable than anticipated. The interview was no longer just a segment. It was a duel, and neither woman was backing down. The camera zoomed in as Madison prepared her next move. This was just the beginning. Madison's polished demeanor was beginning to crack. She had expected Karoline Leavitt to be defensive, emotional, or at the very least, easy to rattle. Instead, the young conservative remained poised, delivering counterpoints with the precision of a seasoned debater. Every attempt Madison made to corner her was met with an equally sharp rebuttal. The tension in the studio was electric. Viewers at home could feel it, and so could the crew behind the scenes. Madison leaned forward, her eyes narrowing as she shifted tactics. Let's talk about the younger generation, Karoline. You've spoken out against progressive movements, including student activism and social justice reforms. Given that you're part of this generation, don't you think you're out of touch with your own peers? Karoline didn't miss a beat. I think what's out of touch is the assumption that every young person must conform to one set of beliefs. There are millions of young Americans who value free speech, personal responsibility, and limited government. Just because our views don't align with the media's preferred narrative doesn't make them invalid. Madison's lips tightened. So you're saying that issues like systemic inequality and climate change are just narratives? Karoline held her ground. I'm saying that these topics deserve real discussion, not just talking points designed to shame people into agreement. The studio fell silent. A few audience members even nodded in quiet approval. Madison could feel the momentum slipping away from her. She was losing control of the interview, and that was unacceptable. Her voice grew sharper. So let's be real here, Karoline. Do you actually believe everything you say, or are you just playing a role for conservative media? Because let's be honest, it's quite profitable. A low murmur swept through the audience. The question was pointed, personal. The producers in the control room tensed. This was dangerous ground. Karoline's expression didn't falter. I could ask you the same thing, Madison. You've made a career out of attacking conservatives. Do you truly believe every word you say, or is it just good for ratings? The audience gasped. Even Madison seemed momentarily taken aback. But the moment passed quickly, and something inside her snapped. With an icy smirk, she scoffed, her voice dripping with condescension. Oh, please. You're just another privileged conservative who thinks she knows better than everyone else. You have no idea what real struggle looks like. The words hung in the air like a slap. The studio fell into a stunned silence. Even the producers, who had seen Madison push boundaries before, knew she had crossed a line. Karoline's jaw tightened, but she didn't react with anger. Instead, she sat back, exhaling slowly as if absorbing the weight of Madison's words. Then, she spoke, calmly, but with unmistakable strength. Struggle doesn't belong to one political ideology, Madison, and respect isn't something you give only to those who agree with you. The silence was deafening. The control room was in chaos, unsure whether to cut to commercial. Madison realized too late that she had gone too far, but the damage was already done. The air inside the studio was suffocating. The moment Madison Clark uttered those words, "You have no idea what real struggle looks like," a heavy silence settled over the room. Even the most diehard supporters of Prime Perspective could feel it. This wasn't just a heated debate anymore. This was an open insult, and the backlash was already forming. In the control room, producers exchanged frantic glances. The director's hand hovered over the button to cut to commercial, but he hesitated. The tension was gripping, raw, and unpredictable, television gold. Yet, beneath the spectacle, there was an unmistakable undercurrent of disaster. Karoline Leavitt remained composed, though a flicker of something unreadable passed through her eyes. She knew what had just happened. Madison had overplayed her hand. Instead of firing back in anger, Karoline let the weight of Madison's words settle. Then, in a voice steady and deliberate, she delivered the final blow. "I think the audience can decide for themselves who is out of touch, Madison." With that, she leaned back in her chair, allowing the silence to work in her favor. The studio was frozen. Madison's face twitched slightly, as if realizing, too late, that she had lost control of the narrative. The power dynamic had shifted. The director couldn't stall any longer. "We'll be right back," Madison said hastily, forcing a thin smile as the screen cut to an emergency commercial break. As soon as the cameras stopped rolling, chaos erupted. Producers rushed onto the stage. A junior assistant whispered frantically into Madison's earpiece about the incoming flood of social media reactions. Meanwhile, Karoline calmly stood, thanking the stage crew before walking off with quiet dignity. Her phone vibrated incessantly. Messages, missed calls, notifications. She knew what was happening without even checking. Backstage, Madison ripped off her microphone, tossing it onto the desk. "What the hell just happened?" she snapped, glaring at her producer. "Why didn't you cut the segment earlier?" The producer, a seasoned veteran, met her gaze with an expression of barely concealed worry. "Because we were hoping you'd pull back," he said bluntly. "But you didn't, and now it's all over the internet." Madison's heart pounded as she grabbed her phone. The headlines were already forming. Madison Clark's disastrous interview with Karoline Leavitt sparks outrage. Liberal host crosses the line. Viewers demand apology. Karoline Leavitt stays classy as Madison Clark implodes on live TV. Hashtags like hashtag Fire Madison Clark and hashtag Respectful Debate Matters were trending within minutes. Even prominent liberal commentators were condemning her remarks, calling them unnecessary and unprofessional. She swallowed hard, her fingers tightening around the phone. For the first time in her career, she felt something unfamiliar. Not just regret, but fear. The storm had begun, and this time, she wasn't sure she could control it. The newsroom of Prime Perspective was in turmoil. Phones rang off the hook, emails flooded in at an uncontrollable pace, and the social media team was drowning in an avalanche of comments, most of them negative. The network had faced controversies before, but nothing quite like this. Madison Clark sat in her office, staring at her computer screen as the headlines multiplied before her eyes. Madison Clark under fire for live on-air insult. Calls for firing grow as viewers slam disrespect. Karoline Leavitt takes the high road after verbal attack. The damage was spreading like wildfire. Even some of her usual allies in the media were publicly criticizing her, urging her to apologize. She clenched her jaw, scrolling through the reactions. Thousands of tweets dissecting her words, comparing them to past incidents where other hosts had been taken off the air for lesser offenses. The realization settled in. This wasn't just controversy. This was career-threatening. A sharp knock at her door broke her trance. The head of programming, Daniel Whitmore, stepped in without waiting for permission. His expression was grim. "Madison, we need to talk." She forced a breath, leaning back in her chair. "I assume this is about the so-called outrage." Daniel didn't sit. He folded his arms and gave her a hard stare. "Madison, this isn't something you can brush off. The network is in full damage control mode. We're getting calls from advertisers. Some are already pulling out." She scoffed, rolling her eyes. "Over one comment? Come on, Daniel. People love a little controversy." This wasn't a little controversy. His voice was steel. "You personally attacked a guest on live television in a way that even our own audience found unacceptable. You didn't just argue, you belittled. And Karoline handled it better than you. That's why this is blowing up." Madison tensed. She wasn't used to being reprimanded. Not like this. "So what? You want me to grovel? Issue some pathetic, forced apology?" Daniel sighed, rubbing his temple. "I want you to fix this before it gets worse." He placed a piece of paper on her desk. Legal drafted a statement. "You issue this apology today, publicly, and we try to put this behind us." Madison skimmed the statement. It was filled with carefully worded damage control. I deeply regret my remarks. I respect all voices in political discourse. It was never my intention to be disrespectful. She slammed the paper down. This makes me look weak. Daniel's patience was wearing thin. Madison, you don't have a choice. You either apologize or you put your career on the line. The words sent a jolt of anger through her. She had built her reputation on being fearless, unfiltered. Now, she was expected to bow down to a younger, conservative newcomer. The thought made her skin crawl. "I'll think about it," she muttered. Daniel shook his head. "Don't take too long." With that, he walked out, leaving the door open, a silent message that time was running out. Madison stared at the apology letter, her mind racing. She knew what she should do, but deep inside, resentment burned. She wasn't ready to surrender just yet. The walls of Prime Perspective seemed to vibrate with tension. The moment Madison Clark's defiant tweet went live, the newsroom descended into chaos. Producers huddled in frantic discussions. The legal team scrambled to assess the damage, and Daniel Whitmore, the head of programming, stood frozen in front of a large monitor displaying the breaking news. Madison Clark refuses to apologize. Network faces crisis. Sponsors pull out as liberal host sparks backlash. PR nightmare. Can Prime Perspective survive Clark's outburst? The response was immediate and brutal. Several major advertisers publicly announced they were withdrawing their sponsorships. Viewers, both liberal and conservative, were calling for her termination. Prominent journalists and media figures distanced themselves, condemning her for her arrogance and lack of professionalism. Even Prime Perspective's competitors were seizing the opportunity to take shots at the embattled host. Daniel slammed his phone onto his desk and stormed into Madison's office, not even bothering to knock. "What the hell did you just do?" he barked. Madison sat at her desk, arms crossed, her expression unreadable. "I stood my ground," she said coolly. Daniel's nostrils flared. "No, you threw gasoline on a fire that was already burning out of control. Do you even understand what's happening right now? We're bleeding advertisers, Madison. Corporate is breathing down my neck. I just got off call with the board. They want you gone." For the first time, Madison's confidence wavered. "What?" "You heard me," Daniel snapped. "They're giving you one last chance. You go on air tonight, retract your statement, issue a full, sincere apology, and maybe, just maybe, you keep your job." Madison clenched her jaw. The thought of apologizing now, after standing her ground, made her stomach turn. "And if I refuse?" Daniel's expression was stone cold. "Then you're fired. Effective immediately." The words hit her like a punch. She had spent over a decade building her career at Prime Perspective. She was their star, their voice, and now they were ready to throw her away? "You can't be serious," she said, forcing a laugh. Daniel's stare didn't waver. "Make your choice, Madison. But don't take too long. The clock's ticking." With that, he turned and left, slamming the door behind him. Alone in her office, Madison felt a wave of emotion she hadn't experienced in years. Uncertainty, fear, anger. She looked at her phone. Her tweet was still blowing up, the comments relentless. Some praised her for standing her ground, but most were calling for her downfall. She exhaled shakily, gripping the edge of her desk. For the first time in her career, she wasn't sure what to do. Madison Clark sat alone in her office, staring blankly at the newsroom outside her glass door. The hum of activity, producers scrambling, journalists whispering, felt distant, like she was watching from the other side of a soundproof wall. The ultimatum from Daniel Whitmore echoed in her mind. Apologize or be fired. She had always prided herself on being fearless, on never backing down. That defiance had made her a household name, but now it threatened to be her downfall. Her phone buzzed, snapping her out of her daze. It was Claire, her agent. "Madison," Claire said, voice clipped with urgency. "I just got off the phone with corporate. If you don't retract that tweet and issue a formal apology on tonight's broadcast, you're done." "I know," Madison muttered. "Then why the hell haven't you done it yet?" Claire's voice was sharp. "Do you have any idea how hard I'm working to keep your career afloat? This is your last shot. Swallow your pride and fix this." Madison swallowed hard. "And what if I don't?" A beat of silence. Then Claire sighed. Then you'll be untouchable. No network will touch you after this, Madison. You'll be radioactive. Madison closed her eyes. She had spent years climbing to the top of political media. She had built a brand, a legacy. And now, with one bad decision, it was crumbling. The newsroom lights flickered slightly as the evening broadcast approached. The teleprompter was already loaded with a network-approved apology. All she had to do was go on air, read the words, and she might survive this. But every fiber of her being resisted. She stood abruptly, walking to the window that overlooked the city skyline. New York had always been her battlefield, the place where she had fought to prove herself. Was she really about to throw it all away? A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. It was Daniel. He didn't look angry anymore, just tired. "Madison," he said quietly. "It's time." She exhaled shakily, gripping the edge of her desk for support. The decision was hers to make, and she only had seconds left. The studio was silent as Madison Clark stepped onto the set. The bright lights bore down on her, but for the first time in her career, they felt suffocating. The cameras were ready, the teleprompter was set, and millions of viewers were waiting for her to speak. Behind the scenes, Daniel Whitmore stood with his arms crossed, watching her closely. The network had made itself clear this was her last chance. The script in front of her contained the words that could save her career. "I deeply regret my remarks. I sincerely apologize. I understand the importance of respectful discourse." The words tasted like ash in her mouth. The countdown began. 5, 4, 3, 2. The red on-air light flashed, and Madison's expression turned unreadable. The cameras zoomed in, capturing the moment that would define her future. She inhaled deeply, and then she made her choice. Instead of reading from the teleprompter, she turned directly to the camera. "Good evening," she began, her voice steady but sharp. "I know there's been a lot of discussion about my comments during my interview with Karoline Leavitt. Many have called for me to apologize, to backtrack on what I said." The control room tensed. Daniel's face turned pale. This was not the script. Madison continued, her gaze unwavering. "But I won't do that." The entire newsroom froze. She leaned forward, her tone unwavering. "I've spent my career standing by my beliefs, even when they were unpopular. I will not be bullied into saying something I don't mean. What I said was blunt, but it was honest. And if honesty is something we're no longer allowed to have in media, then maybe it's time I step away." The silence in the studio was deafening. Daniel slammed his fist against the control panel. "Cut the feed. Now." But it was too late. Madison Clark had just burned the last bridge she had left. The broadcast abruptly cut to black. The network scrambled to regain control, but the damage had already been done. Within minutes, the internet exploded. Madison Clark resigns live on air. Defiance or career suicide? Clark refuses to apologize. Prime Perspective scrambles as host goes rogue. Backstage, security was already waiting. As Madison walked off the set, the weight of what she had just done settled over her. She had made her choice. There was no going back. Daniel met her at the exit, his face a mix of fury and disbelief. "You just ended your career," he said flatly. Madison gave a small, almost defiant smile. "Or maybe I just started something new." And with that, she walked out of the newsroom, stepping into the unknown. The crisp New York air hit Madison Clark's face as she stepped out of the Prime Perspective headquarters for what she knew was the last time. The studio doors closed behind her, shutting out the chaos inside. Paparazzi had already gathered, their cameras flashing, reporters shouting her name. She didn't stop. She didn't answer. She just kept walking. Her phone buzzed relentlessly in her pocket. Texts, missed calls, social media notifications exploding. Some messages were from former colleagues, some from critics gloating over her downfall, and a few were from people who respected what she had done. She finally ducked into a waiting car, slamming the door shut behind her. Only then did she allow herself to breathe. "Where to, ma'am?" the driver asked. Madison hesitated. For the first time in years, she had nowhere to be. No meetings, no calls, no scripts to read, no show to prepare for. She was untethered. "Just drive," she muttered, looking out the window as the city blurred past. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through the headlines. Madison Clark goes out in flames. Network confirms termination. What's next for Madison Clark after shocking on-air walkout? Karoline Leavitt responds, I wish Madison the best. That last one made her pause. She clicked on the article, half expecting a gloating remark, but instead, Karoline had taken the high road again. I don't take any pleasure in what happened. I believe in the importance of open dialogue, and I hope Madison finds the next chapter that's right for her. Madison scoffed, tossing the phone onto the seat beside her. Karoline might have won the battle, but the war wasn't over. Then, her phone rang. A number she didn't recognize. Probably another journalist looking for a statement. But something made her answer. Hello. A deep voice responded. Madison Clark. I've been watching what happened, and I think you and I need to talk. She frowned. Who is this? A pause. Then, let's just say I'm someone who believes your voice isn't done yet. Her pulse quickened. Maybe she had lost her job. Maybe she had burned every bridge at Prime Perspective. But maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something new. Madison Clark gripped her phone tighter, her mind racing. The voice on the other end was smooth, confident, and carried the weight of someone who wasn't just another journalist looking for a scoop. Who exactly am I talking to? She asked, forcing her voice to stay steady. A low chuckle came through the line. Let's just say I'm someone who appreciates people who don't bow to the mob. People who aren't afraid to say what they mean, even when the world tells them not to. Madison frowned. That's vague. You're smart enough to figure out, the man said. Look, I won't waste your time. What happened at Prime Perspective was inevitable. They don't want real voices. They want puppets who read from a script. You, on the other hand, you're something different. She exhaled sharply. And what exactly do you want from me? I want to offer you a platform. A pause. Madison leaned forward. Go on. The man's voice remained smooth, controlled. I run an independent media network. We're building something that doesn't answer to corporate sponsors, doesn't cave to social media outrage. A place where voices like yours can thrive, without censorship. Madison's skepticism flared. And what's the catch? No catch, he said. Just a chance to rebuild on your own terms. You'd have full creative control, your show, your rules. You won't have to answer to executives breathing down your neck. Madison chewed on her lip, staring out the window. The idea was tempting. After years of fighting for control at Prime Perspective, she had lost the war. This could be a second chance. Who else is involved? She asked cautiously. Some big names, the man said, but I won't waste your time throwing them at you. The real question is, do you want in, or are you planning to fade into obscurity? The words stung, but she couldn't deny the truth in them. For the past 12 hours, she had been painted as a disgraced host, a cautionary tale. The media had all but written her obituary. But maybe, just maybe, this was her way back. She took a breath. I want details. A meeting. In person. The man chuckled again. That's the Madison Clark I was hoping to talk to. A pause. Then, he added, be in D.C. tomorrow. My assistant will send you the details. The line went dead. Madison stared at the phone in her hand. Everything she had built was gone. But now she had a choice. She could disappear, or she could rise again. And if there was one thing Madison Clark never did, it was disappear. With renewed determination, she turned to the driver. Take me home, she said. I've got a flight to catch. The private jet hummed softly as it soared toward Washington, D.C. Madison Clark sat by the window, watching the city lights grow closer beneath her. It had been less than 24 hours since her public implosion at Prime Perspective, but already she was on the verge of something new, something bigger. The flight attendant approached her with a glass of water. We'll be landing in 20 minutes, Ms. Clark. Madison nodded absently, her mind still turning over the conversation from earlier. The mysterious man on the phone had offered her a lifeline, but was it genuine? Or was this just another trap? Another network looking to use her name for shock value? As the jet touched down at a private airstrip, a black SUV was already waiting on the tarmac. No cameras, no flashing lights, no journalists circling like vultures. Just quiet efficiency. The moment she stepped off the plane, the back door of the SUV swung open, revealing a man in his late 50s. Silver hair, sharp eyes, a crisp tailored suit. Power radiated off him. Madison slid into the car, shutting the door behind her. "I assume you're the one who called?" The man smiled. "Jonathan Mercer." He introduced himself. CEO of Vision Media Network. Madison had heard of it. A rising independent media empire, rivaling the influence of mainstream outlets, but without corporate oversight. "Impressive setup," she said, watching as the car pulled away. Mercer chuckled. "We're not here to impress. We're here to change the game. And after last night, you might just be the perfect person to help us do it." She folded her arms. "What exactly are you offering?" "Your own show," Mercer said without hesitation. "Unfiltered, unscripted. No network executives watering down your message. No advertisers dictating what you can and can't say. Just you, your voice, and the audience you built over the years. The way media should be." Madison tilted her head, intrigued. "And in return?" Mercer smirked. "In return, you help us prove that the future of media belongs to those willing to take risks. We're done playing by the old rules." The offer was dangerous. Tempting. A month ago, she would have laughed at the idea of leaving mainstream media behind. Now, it was all she had left. She exhaled slowly. "If I do this, I do it my way." Mercer nodded. "That's exactly what we're counting on." The car pulled up to an unmarked office building. A new headquarters, a new beginning. Madison glanced at her reflection in the window before stepping out. She had been cast out, humiliated, declared finished. But they had underestimated her. Madison Clark wasn't gone. She was just getting started. If you made it this far, comment where you're watching from and let US know if the story of justice moved you.